Hi, welcome to True North, and I am Sonali Karkhanis. I am compelled to comment on whatever podcast, and the reason I wanted to do this is as an Indian Metropolitan, I wondered if we resonated with any of the views of its participants. The podcast is really amusing, sometimes egregious, but mostly entertaining.
Cool, whatever.
Through this episode, we will talk about luxury beliefs. I will explain what that is and how that's affected how we view relationships and social conventional norms. I know what you're thinking. Oh no, this is going to be another one of those opinions. But bear with me. I promise it's going to be entertaining and knowledgeable. So, in whatever podcast, the conversations revolve around how men and women date these days, feminism taken to an extreme, toxic masculinity, body count, OnlyFans, and value systems like what's appropriate, moral, and ethical behavior. If this is not a recipe for dramedy like the show Modern Family, then what is? So let's get into it. Before we do, make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the True North. We have just started and we'd love your support. The Whatever podcast debates swing between outright absurd to intellectually deep.
Alrighty then.
The purpose is to create a fiery debate between men and women and make them look like enemies, which is what makes it really entertaining. So let's watch a clip of what we are talking about.
Women,
Bottom
but there's nothing
50%
traditional about
try
men
in person.
anymore.
Yeah.
We have to split
There's
the
nothing
bills
traditional
with them.
about women anymore.
I thought men are supposed to lead women, so when men get weaker, isn't that essentially what's making the women weaker? And
It's a fair point to say that yes, as men, we ought to take some responsibility. There's like the super tradcon line, which is basically as men, like we bear full responsibility, like as leaders, like the position we find ourselves in, you can say, oh, it's fully men's fault. However, in order to be a leader, you need to have people willing to follow. And feminism has taught women to not follow. Here's the thing though, a lot of women desire those traits in men that you could consider leadership traits, assertive, decisive, etc., leadership, dominant, whatever you want to say. Women want these traits in men, but they don't want to follow. They want the leader, but they don't want to follow.
So obviously, this kind of mix is supposed to stir the pot. Let's watch another clip for more context.
I am
That's what I'm
fascinated by hoes. I'll say it. I'm absolutely fascinated by the way the hoe mind works, the way the hoe hive works. I'm fascinated.
Next
I cover it on
documentary.
my show. You
And
are
it is
correct.
trending.
It is
I'm
trending.
saying, and that's why
when
it's such a
Emma
hot
gets
topic
up
to
and does a
speak about.
video and says something like, it's chic to be divorced before you're 30. It is absolutely fascinating to see how someone's mind can be so warped. In the same way that I think it's fascinating when anybody does anything crazy or says anything crazy, and I cover it on my podcast. I am not knocking it at all. I just tell people what the facts are. You can choose this lifestyle, and here is where you are 99.9% likely to lead in your life, right? You are probably not destined for marriage. You're probably not destined for a stable relationship. Men are going to not want this long term. You can say it 1,000 times. You can have 1,000 cultural examples, and women's still got to go out there and be hoes, because they're about their money and about a Cardi B song or whatever it is. So yes, I think it is fascinating.
So Candace Owens, who is a political commentator, is talking about women who are ultra feminists. Some of them are popular celebrities and some who are engaged in OnlyFans. This platform also offers a parasocial relationship to the subscribers, which gives the men the impression that these women really care about them like a real partner would. But of course, it's a cheap imitation of the real thing.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Here is another example of how the modern world has taken relationships to a whole new dynamic.
Ballroom dancing with some guy in the background of a stream. What was the situation there and who was that guy?
Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube called Abba from Abba and Preach. I think he's trying to steal my girl from me.
Is he?
She's
You
got like a
looked
background.
pretty devastated.
I
but
did.
maybe
Hold on,
that's
wait,
just how
hold on,
your
wait, no,
face
hold
Jesus.
on. Wait, I did not look devastated. When you guys are
A little
watching,
bit, though.
no, I don't. When you guys are
That's
watching
just your
clips,
resting face, though.
no, when you guys are watching clips, there's three responses I can have. I can either like laugh about it, in which case you'll be like, oh my god, he's coping, or I can just sit there and just watch because I'm just watching my chat and stream and be like, oh my god, he's secretly terrorized, or I can be like, oh no, guys, like don't, and like joke about it and be like, oh my god, he's like secretly coping. Like there's literally no response I can have because you're projecting like all of your insecurities on the situation.
This clip went viral for obvious reasons. Destiny, who was in an open marriage with Melina Goranson, was watching her dance with another man while live streaming and obviously looking very uncomfortable. Destiny, who is a famous live streamer, political commentator, and left-wing liberal, is no longer married because his wife just recently left him for another man. No surprises there. This just goes to show that no matter how liberal we may be, relationship arrangements like these can never really work because they violate the very foundation of marriage. I mean, if you cannot and will not commit, then why get married? So a lot of people here are expressing luxury beliefs without realizing it. What are luxury beliefs? The term is coined by Rob Henderson, who has done PhD in psychology from the University of Cambridge. Luxury beliefs are ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class while inflicting cost on the lower social class. It started with his observation at Yale University, where he was doing his undergrad. He realized that most of his peers came from privileged backgrounds and had an unusual set of beliefs. He observed that a lot of influential and powerful people propagate certain beliefs as a way of signaling status, but they themselves do not follow those beliefs, and they are insulated from the consequences, especially if the outcomes are detrimental. Here's a clip that explains it beautifully.
To me, this is one of the most, bringing it all the way back, this is one of the most evil aspects of feminism, is that a lot of the supposed feminists don't really practice what they preach. In fact, I think a lot of elite liberals don't really practice what they preach because they're more likely to get married and they're more likely to go to some school and
They have
obviously
less sex as well, less casual sex.
less casual sex, and they do it. So, but the way they talk is they say, "No, man, we need total liberation. We need a revolution, man. Whatever, you know." And then, unfortunately, it's the lower socioeconomic classes who buy that garbage, and they ruin their lives.
I agree with you there.
yeah.
I think
If only there was a time machine
Being an idiot, but I kind of know what's coming.
where these men and women who think it is okay to have a high body count and that marriage is not important, and if they could see themselves in their 40s and 50s, I am sure many of them will orient their views and their lives very differently. I mean, it is true that we're drifting further and further away from our traditional ways of living, and that has ruined the relationship dynamics. I have certainly heard people buying into these views in India, and I'm shocked. I really hope that we will examine these views. Where do they come from? And would they produce a good outcome for our lives? I think some of these beliefs and lifestyle choices have infiltrated into the Indian metropolitan because the dating apps encourage hookup culture. The marketing machines for these dating apps have convinced you that hedonistic pleasure seeking is harmless.
You don't say.
Marriage as an institution was well accepted and desired by both men and women across the world. But that changed with the arrival of sexual revolution in the 1960s, when the oral contraceptive pill was made widely available over the counter, which enabled men and women both to engage in sex without fearing the consequences. Now, arguments can be made that the sexual revolution made it possible for us to behave more like our natural selves, that we are not monogamous creatures. It's all evolutionary biology. However, this argument falls short when counting the emotional and mental health cost that results from broken relationships, and the cost has been particularly heavy for women. There is also an argument to be made for self-control, moral codes, and taking responsibility that has served our humanity well until the sexual revolution. From a cultural perspective, we had no concept of dating in India until the arrival of dating apps. Marriages in India are usually arranged by family and close friends who know you well. It's a cultural system that for the large part has worked really well for us. Personally, I do think there is merit in getting to know each other well, with healthy boundaries before you make the commitment. Louise Perry, who is a British journalist and the author of the book called The Case Against Sexual Revolution, points out that sexual revolution and feminism gave us the impression that sexual pleasures can be divorced from everything else except sexual pleasures. But the consequences have been particularly detrimental for women and children. The winners have been a small minority of men in the top 5% of high achievers with extraordinary personality traits who can attract an unfair share of women. What we have found is that by having rejected the sexual norms of the past, we have made our lives far more complicated and less fulfilling. Sexual stimuli are available at the click of a button, and that demotivates both men and women to pursue a meaningful long-term relationship, which are far more satisfying and fruitful for everyone involved in the long run. I think that these kind of podcasts are predicated on the premise that men and women are adversaries, and that there is very little common ground on which to build a meaningful relationship. But I would argue that masculinity and femininity both can be rescued and made beautiful, and both sexes can win.